Could there be a 1, 2, 3-headed monster in the Ohio State backfield? It is a Three Thoughts Thursday, combining with a position preview because training camp is exactly 2 weeks away for Ohio State. Welcome to The Beat, presented by The Waterworks. I am Austin Ward. That is Jeremy Birmingham. And I find this group, the Ohio State running backs, to be the most fascinating on the Buckeyes roster heading into training camp.
I can get behind that. I'm not.
You don't have to.
No,
I do.
I can. Obviously, and we've talked about it a lot over these last few months. We have no idea about this position. We have no idea what the offense looks like when there's a healthy Bo Jackson, when there's a healthy Isaiah West, when there's a healthy Legend Bay, when there's a healthy Turbo Rogers, when there's a influx of Jacoby Jackson. We truly have
when
no
there
idea.
is a Jacoby Jackson.
We don't know at all really how Arthur Smith's influence is going to change the run game. We have no idea who the right guard is going to be or how the offensive line is going to be from a run game perspective, an area that they were kind of hit and miss a year ago until Bo Jackson really took over at the position and solidified things. But yeah, it's a really interesting group and an interesting year for Carlos Locklyn to I don't know if it's to like solidify his reputation, but if he goes out this year and this Buckeye running back by committee group turns into something really, really special, I think you're going to hear a lot of praise for Carlos Locklyn, and it will be deserved.
I do think there's a lot to gain for Carlos Locklyn here, and I think he, as much as anybody, is aware of that year one, when it ends with the national championship and a couple of draft picks, that you're going to get a lot of praise and attention for that. And then a year later, when you don't win a national championship and you don't have Quinshon and Travion, and even if you have a true freshman rush for 1,000 yards, then it just at least opens the door to conversation, which is how much of that was the room that Carlos Locklyn inherited versus how much will he be able to build and mold in his image. I think he's done a really good job. Yeah. The scenario that he faced a year ago, because yes, coaching those two guys in 2024 is a real blessing. It makes your job a little bit easier. Not simple. No. To manage two guys who both want the football and have a track record of as much success as both Quinshon and Travion did, but then to also turn around and lose two players with that level of experience and that level of productivity is not easy. Was there more room? Was there more that you could have asked from the Ohio State rushing attack a year ago? Yes. And like I say with the offensive line, and it's been a broken record, it's not just on Bo Jackson, or it wasn't just on anybody who got the football a year ago, CJ Donaldson, James Peoples, whoever. It's all tied into what that offense looks like, what the game plan was, what the blocking was like. It is a collective, collaborative effort. Now, they were not as experienced a year ago, and they did need Bo Jackson to emerge probably before he was ready. And then while in the midst of dealing with injuries, of which there were a couple of them last year. So it makes it hard to project exactly what that's going to look like for me. And that's also why there's potentially so much potential for Carlos Locklyn to really plant a flag for what his room is going to look like moving forward.
Yeah, and I think that Carlos Locklyn, over the course of the last year, even more so over the course of the last year than the first year when he had Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, it's not easy, but it's pretty helpful to have two guys.
It simplifies it.
Two borderline first-round pick running backs in the backfield at the same time. That is easy. When you talk about the room he inherited, he really inherited one guy, and that was Travion Henderson when he got there in 2024. The room in 2025 was all his. I mean, yeah, there's James Peoples still as a holdover, but I gained a lot of – you can correct me if you think I'm reading it wrong or if you felt similar or differently or similarly, but – it was last February, a month after the national championship run is over, and all the discussions, James Peoples this, James Peoples that. Yeah. And it was Carlos Locklyn was like, the best backs in my room are my freshmen. And he would say that to pretty much anybody who would listen. They added CJ Donaldson because he wanted some experience and a guy who could maybe do a little bit of the dirty work. But there was no pretense last February or March or April that James Peoples was the heir apparent to Travion and Quinshon, despite the fact that most people outside looking in were like, that's the obvious choice. And Carlos Locklyn was very, very adamant that he understood his room, that he knew what he had, and he went out, and the first thing he did was recruit Bo Jackson and Isaiah West. So he trusts his guys a lot. And maybe the only person maybe the only person Carlos Locklyn is more confident in than his players is himself. And it's done a pretty good job for him thus far in his career. And this season, when you go into this with a healthy Bo, with a healthy Isaiah, with the speed influx that you get with Jacoby Jackson and Legend Bay, I think that there's an opportunity for, and it will sound bonkers probably because of how good Travion and Quinshon were, but I think in the total sum of this room, I think that this year could be the best total room that he's had in his 3 years when you go 1 through 4. Because you're adding elements that you just haven't had with Legend Bay. If you can get him involved in this offense and find a role for him.
I suppose that's possible. Then it becomes a different question, which is, would you rather have a top 2 that is Quinshon and Travion, or a top 4 that is, as I'm looking at it right now, and certainly Bo Jackson would appear to be the most likely to prove this wrong. I don't know in terms of carries, in terms of statistical production, in terms of yardage, even in terms of touchdowns, if there's going to be a wide margin between those 4. So the question is, would you rather have 2 elite backs or 4 above average to stand out running backs, but maybe no first or second round pick? And I'm saying all of this while knowing like Bo Jackson very well could become that, and perhaps while he was injured in the second half of the season, or some of the plays that he may have missed against Indiana and Miami, maybe I'm holding that against him too much. That could very well be the case. I'm openly admitting that. I would like to see what that looks like for him when you come off of a full offseason, when you have that level of experience as a freshman, enjoy some success, and then also see that there was a lot more meat left on that bone for him. That could very easily happen. There's also, I think, a path forward where Isaiah West, whose name was the first one brought up by Brandon Ennis in the conversation on Woody Wednesday on the beat, that he becomes a guy who elevates when fully healthy. We've seen the explosiveness from him, a much smaller sample size compared to Bo. And why I say 3-headed, I don't think that Legend Bay is fully in this conversation still, but Jacoby Jackson, when you think about the SEC experience and the mature frame and the amount of time that he spent in college football, he doesn't flash in terms of like straight line speed, but toughness and ability to get 10 to 20 yards. He did that pretty consistently 2 years ago at Florida. I don't know how that shakes out, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just becomes a collaborative effort of 3 or 4 guys, and then you're flipping a coin on which you'd rather have, or maybe you're not flipping a coin and you would just rather have 2024.
I think the hard part is that the more guys you turn to, the harder it is to determine who is the hot hand at any given moment, right? This is not a bold prediction show, but here's one I'll give you for running backs. Bo Jackson will have less yards this year than he did as a freshman.
Okay.
We
can be a combination of reasons for that,
right? But I think it's going to be because what we talked about last October that I mentioned on Snap Judgments for one of our shows, that the plan heading into the later part of last season was 40% Bo, 40% Isaiah, 20% CJ Donaldson. And that got skewed a little bit because Bo really did continue to play really good football up through the Michigan game, where he might have been the best player on the field that day. There are ways.
Not coincidentally, the best Ohio State blocked for the run game.
Right. So, I mean, those things work hand in hand. I just think that you have an opportunity with this group to really take a step forward for every one of these guys. And, you think about Jacoby Jackson, and yeah, he's in year 7 of college football. That's helpful, right? That's good to have experience, but it's also he's in year 7 of college football. There's a reason the guy plays college football for 7 years and isn't off to the NFL after 3 or 4, right? Sure. So, what is a proper expectation for him? I don't think he's going to be thirding the carries with Isaiah and Bo. I think that you might see a 35, 15, 15 type of split between, because I can't get it out of my head the way people talk about Legend Bay. And if he can just hold on to the football, he is too explosive and too athletic to not just give the ball to and say, go do something. And we saw Ohio State very rarely turn to true freshman running backs in over the last decade plus, but the ones that have done it are pretty special players, and they all had the similar conversation about them. It's like, there's a gear here we just don't have.
It's artistry in motion.
And that's what J.K. Dobbins had in contrast to Mike Weber. That's what Travion Henderson had in contrast to Mayan Williams. And that's what I think Legend Bay has in contrast to both Isaiah and Bo Jackson. Because he has a gear that, I mean, again, hyperbole is hyperbole, right?
But this program doesn't usually traffic in that.
They really don't. And the guys that have been doing it when it comes to Legend Bay, artistry in motion, Mick Marotti comparing him to Percy Harvin, Ryan Day bringing up Curtis Samuel,
and
Tyreek Hill. Like, these are not men who are prone to blowing that type of smoke up someone's rear end.
I don't know that I've ever heard Mickey Marotti do that.
And so that's why I'm like, man, it is really hard to ignore that. The only other freshman I've ever heard that type of discussion, or two guys, is Marvin and JJ.
Yeah.
I've never heard that sort of talk about another freshman, but besides those two receivers who were from other planets. So when it comes to Legend, like, I think it's fair to enter August saying he doesn't need to be in this conversation.
Yeah.
But I can't not put him in the conversation because the way people have talked about him is just too good. They have to find a way to make money on it. It's just too good.
It's too good. He's the running crooner. Legend Bay has clearly changed his body, and so have you.
I have. Thanks to Awaken 180, I learned how to control my impulses, which is an important part of life in general. Just because you're hungry doesn't mean you need a Snickers. Sometimes you just need to mix in a little protein. Say, hey, you know what?
Hungry? I can wait.
I can wait. Or I'll eat this chicken that I put in the car and, prepped ahead of time.
What?
It's about making smarter decisions. It's not about not eating things you like. It's about
car chicken.
It's about eating smarter. It's about eating better. And it's about showing yourself that you can make changes that will positively impact your life. My joints feel great. I don't snore anymore. I've lost a total of more than 45 pounds on Awaken 180. Go to awaken180weightloss.com. They can help you. And then guess what? You have coaching for life. You never are out of the program. So it's really something that people should look into.
Did you say change?
I did say change.
Oh, seasons change, but comfort doesn't. Call the Waterworks and Header Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing for maintenance, installation, and repairs, or visit online at thewaterworks.com. The Waterworks and Header Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing, proud sponsors of Ohio State athletics. Yeah, it's I think for all four of these guys that are primarily in the conversation for us, and if we want to include Turbo Rogers or Favor Aki, I mean, we could, because the same thing would apply. I think all of them have the ability to give Ohio State what they want, to play the role that they could carve out for them in this offense. I think Arthur Smith, Carlos Locklyn, Ryan Day, Tyler Bowen would all be able to come up with a plan to use any of them if they needed to. But, I think when you described it with the wide receivers as all of the question marks for them outside of Jeremiah Smith, I feel like the entire group is question marks. And I don't mean that as doubts. I don't know what year two, what the leap looks like for that healthy Bo Jackson, or how they fit that piece together. Same thing for Isaiah West. I go through the whole list. I believe all of them are good, and I know that Carlos Locklyn believes in all of them, or they wouldn't be in his room in the first place. Yeah. He certainly doesn't operate out of desperation, and he made that very clear the last time that we talked to him. Now, 2 months ago, on the record conversation about it, where it's like, he hears people saying the things that I'm talking about right now. It's uncertain. Who's going to take the load? What's the workload going to look like? Did they need, something splashier than Jacoby Jackson in the transfer portal? He heard all of that. He said, these are my guys. I picked them. And if he didn't believe in them, I pretty strongly feel he would have moved on in a different direction. And that was part of the conversation for Ohio State in December and January. So in a similar vein to when we've talked about the offensive line, and when we will again during the training camp preview series, the Buckeyes made their choices and felt really comfortable with it. I have not sensed, at least from Carlos Locklyn, any uncertainty. But the reason that we can reasonably still have that question mark conversation comes from the top of the pyramid, because that guy, Ryan Day, said it at the start of spring, and he said it again at the end of spring.
Yeah. If you go back to the portal, just the Jacoby Jackson, Ohio State would have been very, very involved if Nate Frazier or Jaden Baugh or some of the other running backs that actually talked about entering the portal had entered the portal.
Right.
I'm pretty confident about that, especially Jaden Baugh. They loved him. But it's not like Kewan Lacey.
But not necessarily someone, I don't know, leaving Ann Arbor.
Right, for example. Well, that's $2 million that Justice Haynes is getting to go home to Georgia. I don't think Ohio State would have done that, but Georgia Tech, what else are they going to spend their money on? And those are PR wins to bring a kid like that back home. I think that's the question marks you mentioned. The hardest part of it is that we didn't see the next step in Bo Jackson or the next step in Isaiah West in the spring. There's nothing that we can point to from the spring and say, well, this is okay. So we know that this happened. Physically, he changed. Bo was a bit of a lightning rod at the end of last season. There was the discussion about the transfer portal, the negotiating. Like, I think Ohio State would have absolutely loved to have Bo Jackson out there in the spring to say, this is why we've decided to invest more heavily into your future. Mm-hmm. You took a chance on Ohio State. Coming out of high school, you did it for basically nothing. You earned this, but now we want to see the immediate return. Yeah. Like Brandon Ennis is a prime example. There's tons of questions about Brandon Ennis, but we can physically see Brandon's body has changed. His quickness looks a little bit better than it did a year ago because we got to see him in spring camp. Without being able to see Bo, without being able to see Isaiah, like it is impossible to look at the running back group and not have questions and not doubts, but just legitimate questions and say, what if there isn't a leap? What if Bo Jackson didn't get quicker? What if he didn't get faster? He didn't look physically stronger, but that's because he couldn't really do much lifting because his shoulder was in a sling. So like there are no players on this Ohio State roster that will have more eyeballs on them in the first 3 days of training camp in August than Bo Jackson and Isaiah West, because those two, that will be the first chance that anybody's in the media or any fan has had the chance to see them and say, okay, so he did get faster. Oh, he is bigger. He is better. And if they're not noticeably bigger or faster or better, then the questions turn into worry, I think.
I think that's a fair way to look at it. And really interesting context about spring camp and what was missing, because, you know, what's different about the conversation about Bo Jackson right now compared to last July or last April? Because, you know, I've seen Bo Jackson on the practice field at his best, aside from the 1,000-yard rushing and like more evidence of what he can do. There were Student Appreciation Day, the carries that Bo Jackson had in spring as a true freshman are burned in my brain.
Yeah.
Now, it's also on the heels of what Carlos Locklyn was saying and his excitement around Bo Jackson. And then I remember vividly, it was a red zone drill. Bo Jackson takes one off tackle, runs around, past three guys, pretty elite defenders as well. And then he finishes off the drive by moving the pile with a 2 or 3 yard touchdown run and pushing it forward. And so that is different. It's important to keep that in mind. We've seen Bo Jackson do that. We've also had spring practices where those become fresh memories and inform your opinion. And that's what's been missing from the last 7 months.
We didn't get that a year ago with Isaiah West. We didn't get it this year with Isaiah West. So,
and now the difference is, and some of this is, you know, taking it on faith or secondhand, third-hand conversation. It feels like there's a high level of confidence that bigger, faster, stronger, more confident version of Isaiah West is going to be on display on August 6th in 2 weeks. And there may be still like some mystery about Bo Jackson. Now that could be because the expectations have changed for him, where they were much lower for Isaiah West coming off of such a small sample size of work a year ago. But, you know, as Brandon Ennis said on Wednesday, like, this is a guy that earned into year 2 a spot on the leadership council, named as someone making the most out of OTAs, was a talk of, you know, June recruiting camps. Right. And one day, like, that's a name that came up a lot.
Right. So the question is, why is Bo Jackson?
Is that just relative to lower expectations? Right. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
And so that's why this position feels so. We've talked about it a number of times. When Ohio State is its best, it has an elite running back. Maybe they have 2. Maybe they have 4. Maybe they have none. And that is actually,
that's a terrifying thought.
The debate here, because you just don't know. Like, there is a lot of evidence to support Bo Jackson being really good. Okay, that was an entire season, freshman year, where it was obvious the first time he touched the football in the Grambling game, like, okay, he's better than C.J. Donaldson and James Peoples. And then Ohio State did a nice job, like, slow burning that towards the end of the season. But is he better than Bo Jackson was a year ago? Because if he's not better than Bo Jackson was a year ago, then the running game is not going to be better than it was a year ago. And the running game a year ago was not good enough to win Ohio State a national championship. It just wasn't. Now, it's not all, as we started at the top of the show, it's not all because of the running backs, but there was one conversation that Ryan Day kept having all offseason: explosives. Running backs are allowed to score too. Running backs are allowed to make big plays. So, like, that has been the focus. So we'll see.
We will. We're 2 weeks away from the start of training camp, and all eyes are going to be on that backfield, at least when it comes to the Beat in the Austin and Berm Show, presented by the Waterworks. Can't wait for it. Can't wait to get to Chicago next week, and can't wait for a Freaky Friday mailbag with your questions. You can send them to us at the Austin and Berm Show at gmail.com. That's the Austin and Berm Show at gmail.com. And of course, he's Berm, and I'm Austin, and we'll see you tomorrow on the Beat.